Mindful Coach podcast. So welcome to this episode of the Mindful Coach podcast. I'm your host, Brett Hill, the founder of the Mindful Coach Association, and I am delighted to have with us today a really exceptional person who's got some great insights and resources to make available to us all and talk about where she's on her journey to bringing mindfulness to the leaders of the world and more. So let me introduce to you Pam Marcheski. She's the principal owner of Intentions to Actions Leadership, a mindfulness-based leadership company that centers around helping individuals and organizations identify their desired leadership intentions in both personal and professional life. They have a structure of using traditional leadership development models combined with foundations of mindfulness. So if you think about putting those together, you've got a great formula for some amazing growth and insights to help people. She comes from a mindful leadership coaching after spending 25 years as a senior corporate executive. So during her final years in this career path, she began her own personal journey of mindfulness and quickly saw that with mindfulness, the scope of her daily life, the impact of it, how powerful it was and important it was to help her do her work better and to help those in her organization as well. So thank you and welcome to the show, Pam.
Thank you, Brett. That was a mouthful, but thank you so much.
It is a mouthful. Well, you know that when I have guests who have such rich histories, it takes a while to kind of get the lead in, but it's like, oh my God, it's so important as framing for who you are and why you're here. Because I like to bring people on the show that have unique points of view that are really well informed, and certainly you are in that category. And not only that, you're not just sitting back going, "Oh, I'm a better CEO," but you're doing things with that information to help others, and that part of being of service to others is really what lights me up. So, on behalf of the world, thank you for that. And let's find out about that. Like, what are you doing? What does your organization do these days?
Oh, we've been having a lot of fun. This year it's been great. We started 6 years ago is when I founded Intentions to Actions Leadership. But really the last few years, it's really been flourishing. And spending a lot of time on individual coaching retreats and offering the 8-week module course of Mpeak that was designed by UCSD's Neuroscience and Mindfulness Department.
Wow.
I love Mpeak. It's just a great course, and I tell people it really taps into the internal competencies that we need in order to show up our best self externally.
And so
it checks it all.
Who comes to you? Who do you work with? What kind of folk?
I work with a lot of different people in retail, a lot of businesses, energy companies. I do a lot of work with anybody who feels like Mpeak is actually a lot of value with first responders, TSA. I right now am doing a lot of work with an energy company here, Sempra Infrastructure. They offer the 8-week course. I'm so proud of them because they've seen the value of offering that to their employees, all of them, the opportunity to explore and go through this 8 modules so that they can show up not just at work, but also personally. So it's really been in a high demand. As it should be, because it's a really phenomenal
And so
course.
Tell us about this course. It's MKIT?
No, this is Mpeak is the course. So the other thing, I'll talk about MKIT in a minute, but Mpeak is really, it's the course that's designed with mindfulness, positive psychology, and strength all tied into it. And it was designed about 10 years ago, and it was tested with the BMX Olympic team.
Oh, wow.
And so really a powerful course with 8 modules. And it gets to the competencies of, compassion, discipline, focus, balanced effort, all of those internal competencies. And it really works with today's demands so that when we work with the internal, we can then be more strategic, be better decision makers, make more, communicate better, developing our teams. So it really helps to kind of open you up and heart and mind so that you can show up your best self externally. So that's of course, it's just been really powerful. I love the fact that it's really, how do I put it, like practical in today's life. It's not, I love everything about mindfulness, but this course is designed to how to put it to work in your
I
daily life.
see.
And but it's still a practice, right? You have to work. Yeah. But it's been a lot of fun to be able to offer that and to see how people have responded to that development program. So we do that with companies. We do it in individual groups. I've done it with just men. I've done it with just women. I've done it, so it can do it virtually and we do it in person. So it's been fun.
So,
And then
excuse me, go ahead,
yeah, go
please.
ahead on that. The M kit that you referred to, that's a kind of a different program that we designed. And my partner and I designed it because we realized that while mindfulness, absolutely, right? The benefits of it, I know it and I know that they're there, but it's intangible. And we do what's in front of us. We do the tangible, the external. And so we created the M kit, and it's the stop, drop, and roll of mindfulness. And we created 5 tangible reminders that people have to bring forward the practice. And so we do a great presentation on how the brain works and how to really tap into, but everybody gets a kit. I'll show you the kit.
Yay.
Yeah, so they get the kit, they get the write-up, and we really talk about how to notice, how to ground, how to take a breath, how to take in all your senses, and then we bring in rain. So how to respond differently.
Right.
And all of that's in the kit, so everybody gets one. Now they have these things in front of them. They can put the timer in front of them. So that reminds them right there, take a pause. Or the compass, just get grounded, be present. So we really found a way to help people bring mindfulness into their daily life in minutes in the day, but lets them really reminds them, I guess, to be able to use those tools to help support them.
I love this bridging of taking people where they're at and then giving them physical assets to help them get to someplace else. That's really, really innovative and creative. And the fact that you put this together into an actual box of materials that people can purchase, it's a kit. It's actually, for those of you that are listening to this, she's holding up an actual box that you can, I guess, can they get this
all
from?
Inside.
She's proud of it, and rightly so, because it is a powerful idea, and it's super well done. So that's kudos to you for putting all that together. So you said, opening the hearts and minds of these, leaders and stuff. How well do they respond? Is that a message you put out, come and join our program, and we're going to open your heart and mind? That's going to make you a better leader. Is that the message that you come, or is that just sort of like in the background? That's what happens, and as a result, yeah.
Background, right? I think when people start to feel less internal friction, the mind just naturally will open up. We don't have to tell people your mind, it's how to deal with the external demands of today.
Yes.
When you've got so much coming at you. And I always say this, look, it used to be where we had some natural boundaries. We would go to work and we would come home. Kids would go to school and they would come home. And you might talk to your family about it, but you weren't attached to your phone. You weren't attached to your email. You weren't attached to everything else. You didn't have to relive it constantly. Those boundaries are gone. They're not coming back. Genie's not going back in the bottle. So it's really important that we recognize that we're not crazy here. We have more coming at us than we've ever had before. Yeah. And we have to learn how to create our own disciplines. And when we can learn how to create our own disciplines, we can take care of ourselves better, and then we show up for others better.
Yes.
But so much is coming at us, just between everything, right? Reminders, phones, texts, email, just all of the demands of it. So how do we create some space?
Right. I agree completely. And it's like the pace and the complexity of this world that we've manufactured is so intense. There's no time to just kind of, when do you ever have a moment to go, oh, how am I actually doing? How do I feel right now?
I love that you say that, because I have an equation. I literally do a math equation for people in a slide in the M kit. And I do complexity times rate minus boundaries will equal your mind state.
Oh, wow. Could you say that again, please? Because I really would have captured that. What was that again?
Complexity times rate minus boundaries equals your mind state.
Wow. My mind is going, it's like, whoa. minus boundaries. That's a really fabulous insight there. I see. Wow. And you could draw a circle around that and say, measure that with a spectrum of how much discipline do you have to actually put this in. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
And you could pick any part of that equation, right? So you can use it as a
Mm-hmm.
practice. I always say, like, take that equation and say, okay, just take complexity, and for a week, just notice all the complexities that you have in your life. What do you have coming at you, right? How many social medias do you look at? How many events do you have? Just noticing without judgment,
Right.
but just
Just
seeing
notice.
how much.
And the impact. What's the impact on you?
Right. And then how fast,
Mm-hmm.
how much do you hit with all the time? And then do you have any boundaries? And you can play with the equation. You can decide.
Mm,
That's the beauty of it all, is when you know the equation and you start to pay attention and you notice without judgment, you can decide, what do I want to do with the
I
equation?
see.
What do I want my mind to do?
That's a really creative and insightful way to frame all of this because, like you say, you could look at your world and say, "Well, I can't do much about my complexity, but I can say no to things. I can have more boundaries, and
Yeah,
that, strangely enough, will reduce the complexity. And
that's
then,
right.
like you say, also, it's like the mind then just it discovers an extra 2 cubic feet of inner space, and you'll relax into that and go, "Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
amazing."
Yeah. Because our nervous system is not supposed to be on
Yeah,
all the time,
right.
right? We're hardwired for resilience. We are, but not at this constant rate
Yeah,
that
I
we're
say
at.
this a lot lately. It's like I see so much of this mentality in the culture and in pop culture and in organizations that you basically have to be a superhero all the time. It's like 24/7 superhero efforts. And so, like when you join an organization, on a scale of 1 to 10, they expect you to be at an 8.5 every day. And you just
Yeah.
can't do that. You just can't do it. And
Yeah. It's really hard. I mean, there really is zero margin for error, it feels like today, especially if you're a leader. The way things come at them and how many people are scrutinizing decisions publicly and within, it's challenging. We can't dismiss that it is very, very hard. And so, how to help people find that inner confidence and that inner strength to really sit back and be strategic and make the right decisions and not a reactive decision can be so powerful.
insanely powerful. Plus, it's how should I say, it's contagious. It's like once you model to someone or your team, I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be thoughtful here. Then everybody gets to experience, oh, what's it like to interact with somebody who's communicating and leading mindfully? And that's a lesson, even though you're not saying, I'm going to teach you today about how to do this. It's not that. It's just like interacting with somebody because we co-regulate each other in that way.
What we emote, we promote. That's one of my quotes. And presence and calm. I mean, that is a superpower today in our world. If you can be the person that shows up and sits down in the boat when everybody's jumping up, people will start to model
That's
that.
so beautiful. I've been thinking about this as a slightly different framework, but the same sort of concept as center, like having a center from which you're experiencing your life. And whenever you're in a more mindful, relaxed place, you don't get knocked off center as much because it's coming from a place that's really resilient in you, that isn't dependent on the behaviors of other people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it's what then happens whenever you deal with these executives or these leaders and they come to you and they're like stressed out, they have so many things going on, and you begin to teach them? Do you meet with any resistance from them about these kinds of techniques and methods?
You know, it's a great question because sometimes that's the interpretation that people with especially executives and their busy lives. Um, I always say dip the toe in the water.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to go all the way in. And I think that if we guide people in, people want this. They need this. So I think highly, highly receptive, and it's been really well received. And I always tell people it's an offering. It's an offering to investigate
Mm-hmm.
and to see what works for you. So I think that, people find their own way once they have the offering. Some things, some of the modules, some of the teachings, some of the coaching really sticks, the story in my head, or, finding the moment to pause. Different things stick for other people, but no, I don't get any
Okay, well, that's
resistance.
fabulous. So one of the things, this is a little different question. It has to do with, some of the coaches and professionals that are listening to this are considering or would like to be offering work to, trainings to organizations. And I have a question in my head because it's been a while since I did that. I used to teach web server security to Fortune 500s, and but the people who bought the stuff was never the team that needed it. And so it's kind of like I get curious about how do corporations or organizations find your work and then say yes to it. Because the people who are buying this, are not the same people who are consuming it, I assume. Am I making that up, or is that true?
I think it varies. I mean, some of the companies that I've worked with, it started at more of a leadership level,
Mm,
and then it's gone down to everybody else. What I do think, like for anybody who wants to do this, and I think it's really powerful work to want to do this and have this to help guide and help people. You need to be relatable to them as
mm,
well, because oftentimes when we do an offering, there's so much else going on, right? So we work really hard to make sure that we speak the language of the organization that we're working with. So I try to understand what the demands are, their mission, their values, their competencies. That's my role. So how do I show the competencies of this course and tie it back to the competencies of the company or the organization I'm
I
working with,
see.
so that they can see a direct link in the value of it?
Hmm.
So it's not outside of who they are, and that's important. That we meet. You should meet all your clients and your companies where
Yeah,
they're at.
that's the same. It would be the same advice for one-on-one with someone, Yeah. Except in this
Absolutely,
case, it's one on
absolutely.
organization. So I love that very much. It's kind of like listening for the organizational values, what they're, in the word you use, competencies, which is a big deal in corporate America, this notion of competencies. Can you say a little bit about that? Like what kinds of competencies are these organizations looking to further?
Well, traditional leadership competencies, if we go back to the oldest leadership books out there, right? They're going to talk about strategy, good decision making, drive for results, team building, communication, leading change. These are some of the core competencies of a leader, right? And you can find those competencies in maybe different language. So today we talk a lot about empathy or, IQ. And in my old world, 20 years ago, it wasn't IQ per se, but compassion was still in
Hmm.
there, right? Still had to, so there might be different language, but the core around those behaviors. So when you understand that, then how does that tie back to anything mindful, right? So if you can create or help somebody to be able to take a pause and be more open, so working on the competencies of openness, well, that opens your mind to be more strategic,
Hmm.
balanced effort. So if we can learn how to have more balanced effort in the world that we're living in and the demands that we're living in, that allows people to make better decisions. So it ties right back to decision making, because we're not making reactive decisions, we're making responsive decisions.
Hmm.
And it's a leader's job to make good, conscious decisions. So you tie them back, right? So that people can see, when I'm working on this, it can lead to this. And that's what I mean by really helping leaders understand the value of it. Traditional leadership has always developments. I mean, I worked for Sears decades ago, and they had great traditional leadership development and spoke to it all the time. That's the external. What's missing is the
Hmm.
internal, and the internal is so vital today based on the conditions.
I see. Oh, that's really helpful to kind of frame in what it is that they're after and how, and you can see how those can map to mindful skills and how that can help amplify every single one of those. So that's really powerful. What happens whenever somebody comes to you and they're like, a fairly senior executive, and they're like really wondering, like, can they are they a good fit anymore? They feel like to continue to execute at the level that they're at is somehow dehumanizing them or taking or harming them in some way. Am I making sense? Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, am I aligned with this work anymore? Sort of question. Do you get people that are like trying to figure out, should I pivot completely out of this and into something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think most humans at some point, like, do I want to explore something different, right? And generally, that might come when you start to feel that internal friction in your mind and your heart and in your physical body, because everything that's happening in the mind is being felt in the physical body. Um, I always feel like it's not necessarily my role to advise on that, but more to offer an
Yes,
investigation of
exactly.
that,
So,
because it's a big exploration. I think, you can go on. There's plenty of websites. LinkedIn's a big one, right? That'll give you a million reasons why you should just drop your job and move on to something else. I think we're a little too quick and cavalier with that. I think sometimes people just need to explore their discomfort and to see, is that true or is this just a moment? And I think when we allow that space for people and ask some questions and let them look at some other things, that I think they find their own journey. Some people find that they just needed to get through that and maybe go at things differently. And others, maybe they do want to explore something different. But I don't, I'm really, I think I try to be really cautious on that being anything that I would push for, but more, let's offer an investigation of what's really happening. Because when we feel discomfort, we want to get away from it. That's the natural
sure.
tendency of our brain and
Yeah.
our body. That's, we're hardwired for it. What if we actually just explored the discomfort? What's really happening? And it is, do we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, or do we really need to make a revision or a pivot of where we're at?
Right. So by supporting the client and exploring, you can maybe help them decompress enough that they can resolve in some way to see what their true relationship is to things.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's it. That is it, especially if you're working in a corporate setting, right? It is about relationships, and sometimes they're flourishing and sometimes they have friction points and sometimes work can feel really draining. One of the modules we teach in Mpeak is on stress, but we do distress and eustress. So really exploring, because people don't talk about eustress. That's the good stuff. So if we had a lot of eustress, we would do that all
So
day
what does
long,
that mean,
right?
eustress? What does that mean?
So eustress. So there's distress and eustress. So eustress is the good stuff. So think of something that you do that you really love doing, but you still have to put effort into it,
Okay.
right? Anything in your life that if you can think of
Yeah.
anything?
For me, it's like playing guitar.
Perfect. That's a great one, right? Like, it doesn't like you just pick it up and everything's perfect. You
Yeah.
work at it, right? You're willing to put the effort into it, but it motivates you. It feels good. That's the good stuff, right? Prepping and getting ready for you, right? Getting this opportunity. Yeah, it took a little work, a little effort, right? To make sure that I was ready and I showed up on time, right? But that's good stuff,
Right.
right? And we don't talk enough about the good stuff, right? Like that we do. So understanding, how do you find the use stresses and make sure that you're feeding that, some of that good stuff. And then there's the distresses. Now, distress, people always talk about burnout, overload, all that big stuff, right? But there's another side of distress that doesn't get talked about enough. And that's the boredom. It's the email. It's the silly little things that take up a lot of time, that agitate us, that are pop-up windows, all of that, right? That's on the other side. They're not heavy holds. They're not hard do's, but they are distressing because they're always there. So if you think about the curve, you've got distress on one side and it goes up, and you've got eustress, and you've got the heavy, heavy stuff on the other side, like the really heavy, distressing projects or demandings or got to make a result. You start to evaluate those in your life. And how do you make sure that you're playing in the zone of eustress throughout your day and not all in just the distress?
Yeah. That's a great way to look at all of that. So, because in that way you can actually make some choices to be sure that you're getting the good stuff, as well as you still have to answer the emails and you still have to deal with all that. And that's
Right.
That's actually like the formula for building intentionally building resilience into yourself so that you can deal with it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then you can get practical and tactical. When we can really talk about it, then it's like, okay, well, how do we have some stresses maybe earlier in the day and not just give into the distresses? How do you build that resilience? How do you build that model for yourself?
And it can be simple too. It can be like just add lots of small. This is one of the things I do in my approach to things. Add lots of small nourishing moments to your day, and that way you get 50 different ways that you touch something really cool and beautiful and lovely. That's simple. It can be as simple as a flower or a sky or a smile or a dog. I'm a dog guy. I gather you might be too. I don't know. Are you?
Dog and cat. I don't have a dog, but I did, and I loved having a dog. Yeah,
I'm responding to the picture she has behind her. For those of you who are on the podcast, she has a I don't know what to call it, an impressionistic picture of a dog that's shaking its, like in the rain, shaking its fur off, and it's really lovely, beautiful picture.
It's titled "Shaking Off the Blues." And it's done by famous artist Iris Scott. Everybody can look it up, but I love it. Everybody loves it because it really is a good reminder for me every day, and for anybody in the background that I'm on video with. It's just a fun, playful. She did a beautiful job.
So moments like that. So there you add something beautiful in your room that you can connect with, and just let yourself have that connection for just a moment. And I'm a believer in adding intentionally those moments into your life as a way to literally feed yourself the inherent beauty of the world around us, and just to touch base with that and cut through all the to-do list for just a moment,
Well, we know, right? All the research and studies show we're hardwired for negativity, but we're certainly not hardwired for positivity. So it is up to us, right? And it makes sense, right? Like if I don't pay attention out on the street, I'm going to get run over by a car. I mean, we're constantly, that's what the brain's doing. It's helping us make sure that we survive. So we have to put some intention into the good stuff, right? It's just not as sticky. So
it's true, absolutely. So it takes more effort, is what I hear you saying. Yeah,
10 times the effort. All the studies show it takes about 10 times the effort. So if I say something to you, like a nice thing to you, I have to say it with real intention. You really need to hear it and feel it for about 10 solid seconds for it to have any real impact. A negative, I'm there.
I agree. I mean, I actually had that as a personal practice for quite a while, because I noticed that, I was doing some work with a therapist, and it occurred to him, and he pointed it out, that I don't really let compliments in. And this is very common, particularly, and I don't want to overcast this, but I think men in particular, and I'm not, at least in my generation, it was not okay to let yourself feel good about things that people said to you. And so because you had to be tough and toughen up, and you couldn't feel your bad stuff, so you couldn't feel your good stuff either. And so it took an effort on my part to kind of go, I'm going to stop and hear that and let myself feel what it feels like to be appreciated. I'm just going to take a moment and let that in. And boy, I can tell you that was a big change for me, but it was a struggle.
Yeah, I love that you allowed yourself to do that work, though, because savoring is so important. When you're in a space where you just really savor, because you've got to make it stickier, right? And I always tell people, do this the most when you're feeling the best. So this is where I do think, it's a judgment of mine, but I think it's backed up with a lot of evidence that in the West, because it's just a different culture than in the East with mindfulness. In the West, everyone wants to come to it when they're in distress, they're stressed out, all of it. But you don't go to the gym to make your arms and legs strong and be able to run when you've already ran, right? When you're in the middle of distress, right? So we work the muscle so that the muscle shows up in the times of need. So it's the more you can do the practice when things are good, that's when you can pull it in when you have a tough moment, when you're starting to feel agitated.
I heard a little quote that I send around on my social media. if you want to be mindful under stress, you have to practice when you're not.
Yes.
It's really, it's really
exactly it.
simple in some ways. So tell us a little bit about how you were an executive and somehow you wound up being in a role of teaching these leaders and future leaders and, first responders and others. So somewhere there was a pivot. We talked earlier about a pivot. Somehow you had a pivot as well. How did that come about?
Yeah, my adult son says I could probably have taken the pivot a little bit sooner. I loved all my experiences in my previous role. I absolutely loved being in retail. I was blessed to fall into it in a time of need. I was a single mom, and I really needed to pivot what I was going to do career-wise. I thought I was going to do politics and law, but food and rent became
I've
critical
heard
in
about
daycare.
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's a pivot right there. But I had worked in retail while I was going to college. I'd had experience in it. I was blessed to have my best friend recommend me and a store manager who took a chance on me and gave me a department manager position. And from there, it's been wonderful. Like he really felt like I had the ability to do more. And I just kept moving. They kept moving me, and I moved my son, I think, 14 times,
goodness.
Alaska,
Wow.
Montana, all over. Spent, 12 years there, 13 years at JCPenney's. And in my last role at JCPenney's as vice president, I loved it. I liked all my roles. But I noticed that in the last few years, I wasn't showing up my best self. I always thought I had I know I had an okay toolbox. They got me somewhere. But the toolbox didn't seem to be opening up at all the right times the way I wanted it to. And once I started practicing mindfulness, I just felt like it created that space for the toolbox to open up. And it helped me really be less reactive, show up more present, make some different decisions about how I was responding to things or maybe even what I was communicating out. Just small, subtle things. I wasn't getting any feedback or, like any dramatic changes, but I felt it. I felt like me personally, I was feeling better. And it also helped me then discover this journey was probably done for me. It was time for me to move on to a new journey. And I wanted to, when that was all coming to an end, I had no intention of doing this, to be honest. I came down from Seattle to UCSD to take the Mpeak course for myself. I loved that it talked about performance, enhancement, awareness, knowledge, all of that. But the minute I took the class after day one, I just knew that it was a course that really could be applicable in the coaching world. And that was when I made the decision that I would stay, and I convinced Pete to let me stay and get certified. It took a year. Hardest training I've ever done.
Wow.
Loved it. But great teacher, great program, and yeah. So yeah, it was absolutely the hardest. There was a couple of times I tried to quit.
He said, "No, you can't quit. You're not permitted to quit."
No. You know what he did? He made me sit with my discomfort, like I was talking about earlier.
And so, how did that work? You were sitting. You're so like, I'm leaving, and he had you sit with your discomfort. How did that work for you? How did that resolve, or what came into your awareness as a result of that?
Well, I don't think it's just like sitting in it, but it's like when you see what the discomfort is, and then how do you want to respond?
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to give in to it, or do you want to push through it? And I could see the story in my head, and some of it was just really silly obstacles and more stories in the head. One of the biggest ones, Brett, you'll find this humorous because I know you do so much with mindfulness and meditation as well. It was literally the recording of myself guiding meditations.
Oh.
That was one of the things. It was dry. I was like such a roadblock for me.
So you didn't like hearing yourself, or you just didn't want to do it, or what was it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and when you start to do something new and it's going to be a new audience, you just want it to be so perfect.
Oh, I see.
Right? Was the sound right? Was my tone right? Was I using the right words? Because it is important.
It's
And I
true.
think that is one thing when you're guiding meditation, that the words are important because you don't want it to be forced, right? It's an offering. But I was overthinking it. I was overthinking all of it, like a good human.
Like a good executive.
A good executive, a good human. And that's where I had to sit with myself for a little while, like just get over it. And so now
Let's just get over.
but
I
it took
know. It's
me.
like, oh, what's the big deal here?
Yeah, yeah. As if, right?
It's a
Like
mindfulness
this is gonna be her
meditation, right?
seriously. But when you have to record
Yeah.
yourself, right? And yeah, now I can do it all the
Sure.
time, but I just send it up. I send it to my partner. I don't listen to me. I just send it. If it works, it works. It'll show up on the website. If it doesn't, you'll be like, tell me to do it again,
Right. Somebody
right?
tell me if this is okay.
Right.
Yeah, I hear you. That's really powerful, though. It's interesting that, it was it wasn't just like oh, this is the best thing ever, and you're all in. It's like, no, it was a grind of some kind to get you through that.
It was
Yeah.
a grind. It was a grind. And I think that anybody who gets the honor of coaching somebody or offering something like this needs to put in that effort, right? To do our own self-exploration. Because this is more than just teaching somebody something mechanical. This is people's lives.
Exactly so. Yeah.
So it's super important. And I take that really seriously. So I think that I didn't want to hold on to it so heavy that I couldn't push past it, but I didn't want to dismiss that it was important.
Well, yeah, and I love that, you're trying to find this balance between overproduction and so laissez-faire that who cares that I'm yelling it from the bathroom to, who cares? It's kind of like, but somewhere in there, there's a space that communicates.
Yeah.
And in my mind, my belief is that the production quality doesn't, you want it to not be in the way, but if you inhabit the right space, the rest of it just kind of comes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And I wanted to make sure that I really did embody, if I was going to teach this course or even any of the basics of mindfulness, that I really understood it. Yes, I had a practice, and a very solid practice, but was I able to offer it in a way that was true to the foundations of it? Not my opinions or my judgments, but true to it, because I think that's important.
I love that so much. Thank you for that. How can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing and connect with your Mkit and all your offerings?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My website is at intentact.com. We're intentions to actions leadership. And we say, what are your intentions, your actions, and close the gap? Well, we did it with the website, Intentact, intentact.com. Lots of all the programs are on there. A lot of resources for guided meditations as well are on there. Ways that they can find me. They can find me at pam@intentact.com. And also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn regularly, so I can always be messaged, and I love it when people connect.
And I
can
testify to the truth of that, because we talk about that we talk with each other on LinkedIn frequently. So thank you for all of that. I will put all of those links into the show notes, and I want to encourage listeners to look it up. Look up intentact.com. Find out about all the good stuff that Pam is doing. Obviously, she's got a wealth of information and a fabulous framework for communicating how to be more of who you are in a world that we need who you are right now in a big way. So I'm really happy that you're doing this work and that you found your way to it, because this stuff that you're talking about and the way you're putting it out there is just really powerful. And I'm happy. I'm happy inside that you're doing this work, to put it very simply.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. I love doing it, and I love the work that you're doing too, and how you're bringing this to life. So thanks for this opportunity. It was great to
Thank you so much. The Mindful Coach Podcast is a service of the Mindful Coach Association.